You are 50 feet above a Russian field and you are going as fast as this aeroplane will go, which is not very fast at all. The grass is a green blur underneath you. Ahead, through a slab of glass thicker than your fist, there is a road, and on the road there is a column, and in about 11 seconds you are going to be on top of it. Everything down there that can point upwards is pointing at you. Little winking lights along the ditch, lazy strings of tracer curling up and then whipping past your ears, and the closer you get the less lazy any of it looks. And then they start hitting you. Not the polite tap of a rifle bullet. The first one goes through the wing and you feel it in the stick, a jolt like a kick. The second one hits something solid on your left, and the entire aeroplane rings like somebody has taken a sledgehammer to a cast-iron bath with you sitting inside it. Dust jumps off every surface in the cockpit at once. A shell, 20 millimeters of it, designed to open an aeroplane the way a tin opener opens a tin, has just struck the machine you are strapped into, and the machine has simply said no. That is the thing about this aeroplane. It says no. So you go through, you pull off the target, you turn for home, and when you climb down onto the grass on legs that do not entirely work, you walk round her and you count. Holes through the wings you could put your fist in. A tail plane like a colander. And there, low on the side of the cockpit, a bright silver smear where a cannon shell hit square and glanced off. You put your thumb in the dent. It is still warm. You are alive and you will fly her again tomorrow because they are already patching her. Now, before we go one step further, I want you to do one thing. Turn round. Look back down the fuselage, past the back of your own armored seat at the second position behind you, because on this aeroplane there is another man. He is sitting about 18 inches behind your shoulders, facing the other way with a machine gun across his knees. And I want you to look properly at what is between him and the sky. It is not steel. The armor that has just saved your life, the beautiful, brutal, load-bearing steel box you have been sitting inside all morning, stops. There is a line, a bulkhead, a place where a man at a drawing board decided the edge of it went. You are inside that line. He is outside it. And the gap between those two seats, 18 inches apart in the same aeroplane on the same sortie, is one of the widest gaps between two men's chances that I know of anywhere in the Second World War. Right. Hang on. Let me get out from underneath this and find a rag, because I have a pint of somebody else's gearbox oil up both forearms and I want to talk to you properly. The name's Reg. I spent the better part of 40 years as a fitter and a restorer. Engines, airframes, gearboxes, tanks, the lot. If it was built to fight, and it had seized, sheared, rotted, or simply sulked, sooner or later it came through my doors on a low loader and sat there dripping on my floor while I argued with it. And of every machine I have had my hands in, this one, the Ilyushin Il-2, the Sturmovik, is the one that does the strangest thing to me. Because I love it. As a piece of engineering, it is one of the boldest, cleverest, most honest bits of thinking anybody did in that entire war. And in a few minutes, I am going to show you exactly why, and you will love it too. And at the same time, it makes my stomach go cold. And by the end of this, you will know precisely why. You will not have heard of her the way you have heard of a Spitfire. So here is a number to start you off, and it is not a misprint. They built about 36,000 of these. 36,000. And if you count the Il-10, the developed version that came straight out of it, you are over 42,000 airframes. That makes the Il-2 Sturmovik the most produced military aircraft in the history of the world. Not of the Soviet Union, not of ground attack aviation, ever built by anybody, full stop. So pull up a stool, mind the swarf, and let me show you the flying tank. And then the bit that nobody ever puts on the poster. Start with the job because the job explains the machine. Ground attack is the worst job in aviation, and I do not say that lightly. A fighter pilot fights up in clean air and can climb away from trouble. A bomber crew goes high and cold and frightened, but at least a long way from the men who want to kill them. The ground attack pilot gets neither. He goes down to 50 feet, straight over the top of an army which consists, from where he is sitting, entirely of people with guns, all of them looking directly at him. No altitude to trade, nowhere to hide. Every Air Force had that problem, and nearly everyone reached for the same answer. Bolt some armor on. A plate behind the pilot's back, a plate under the engine, a lump of steel in front of the oil cooler. It helps, a bit. But it is a bodge, and here is why. That plate is dead weight. Underneath it there is still a whole aeroplane structure, frames, longerons, stressed skin, doing the actual work of holding the thing together. So you are carrying two things, a structure and a shield. Bolt on enough shield to genuinely survive that job, and you have built something too heavy to get off the grass. And here is where Sergei Ilyushin and his design bureau come in, with an idea so simple and so aggressive that it took the rest of the world years to catch up. Do not bolt the armor on. Make the armor be the aeroplane. The heart of the Il-2 is a thing called the bronekorpus, armored hull. The crews and the fitters called it the bath, and once you have seen one you will never call it anything else, because that is exactly what it looks like. A great deep bathtub of hardened steel with the shape of an aeroplane's nose at one end of it. It is not a set of plates screwed onto a frame. It is a single load-bearing shell, formed and welded and riveted out of hardened steel of varying thickness, 4 millimeters in the thinnest places, up to 12 in the worst exposed ones, and it is the structure of the front half of that aeroplane. The wings bolt to it. The engine sits inside it. The pilot sits inside it. The fuel sits inside it. The radiators sit inside it and hang on to that one, because that is the cleverest part of the whole design. Everything that matters, everything that if you shoot it the aeroplane stops flying and the man stops living, is enclosed inside one continuous steel tub weighing around 700 kilograms. 700 kilos, more than a small car, wrapped round the crew and the machinery. And it costs you almost nothing in structural weight because it is not extra. It has replaced the structure. The armor is not being carried by the aeroplane. The armor is the aeroplane. And whoever laid that shell out was thinking hard. The plates are curved and sloped rather than flat. So a shell arriving from below or from the side strikes at an angle and is far more likely to skate off than punch through. The principle that made the T-34's front plate so good applied to something with wings. The glass in front of the pilot's face is not a windscreen. It is a slab, something like 60 millimeters of laminated armored glass. And those radiators. On any liquid-cooled aeroplane, the radiator is the soft spot, the one thing you cannot armor because it has to breathe. Shoot a Spitfire's radiator and she will fly beautifully for about 4 minutes, and then the engine will cook itself solid. Ilyushin's people put the radiators inside the bath and fed them air through ducts with armored intakes and outlets, so the cooling air went in through a slot, round a corner, did its job and came out again, and a bullet coming straight at it hit steel. That is somebody refusing to accept the usual answer. Engineers, bless them, do not do that nearly often enough. That is why the Soviet infantry called her the flying tank. She came over low and slow, and she did not go away. 20-millimeter cannon fire, the thing that opened other aeroplanes like a can, would go into that steel and be turned aside. Ground crews recorded airframes coming home with dozens of holes through wings and tail and being back in the line next morning, because the wings and the tail were never the point. The bath was the point, and the bath was intact. A word on the nicknames, because I want to be straight about which ones I trust. Flying Tank and Ilyushin, an affectionate little pet form of Ilyushin, and the Hunchback for the humped canopy on the two-seater. Those are well attested in Soviet accounts. German troops are very widely said to have called her Schwarzer Tod, the Black Death. That one is repeated everywhere, and is a great deal harder to pin to a solid contemporary German source. It may be genuine. It may equally be a wartime line that got into print, sounded marvelous, and has been copied from book to book ever since. I would not stake my toolbox on it. Right. Now we come to it. Sergei Ilyushin did not design a single-seat aeroplane. He designed a two-seater. The prototype his bureau built and flew before the war had 2 men in it. A pilot up front and behind him, facing aft. A gunner with a machine gun, covering the one direction the pilot cannot see and the one direction from which a fighter will always come. Ilyushin knew perfectly well that a low, slow, heavily loaded machine with nothing watching its tail is a gift to anybody with a fast fighter and a bit of patience. It went into production as a single-seater. They took the gunner out. They deleted the rear position, fared over the hole, put a fuel tank in some structure where he had been, and sent it to war with 1 man aboard and a blind spot behind him that covered the entire rear half of the sky. Why? And here I have to be careful, because this is precisely the sort of question where a confident answer is usually an invented one. There are at least 4 explanations offered, and honestly they are probably all true at once. 1. Weight and performance. She was heavy and underpowered. Take out a man, a gun, his ammunition and his structure, and you get back a few hundred kilograms, which buys a little speed and a bigger bomb load. On paper, a sensible trade. 2. Production. A single-seater is simpler, and in 1941 the Soviet Union needed airframes more than almost anything except bread. 3. Doctrine. There was a genuine argument, sincerely made, that the armor would be protection enough and the fighters would keep the enemy off her back. That argument was wrong, and it was proved wrong very fast. And 4. I am going to say this plainly and then move on, because I am a mechanic and not a Kremlinologist. That design bureau was working under a state which had, within living memory of everybody in the room, arrested, imprisoned, and in some cases shot aircraft designers for failures both real and imagined. Andrei Tupolev, one of the great aircraft designers of the century, designed aeroplanes from inside a prison. That is the atmosphere. When the pressure from above is for more, faster, lighter, cheaper, and the penalty for being awkward is not a difficult meeting, but something a great deal worse. Decisions get taken that nobody afterwards wants to put their name to. Historians argue about how much weight to give each of those 4 reasons, and I am not going to pretend the argument is settled. What is not in dispute is the outcome. The aeroplane Ilyushin designed with a gunner went to war without one, and the Germans found the hole in about a fortnight. Look at it from the point of view of a Messerschmitt pilot, because it is not a complicated problem. Here is a target that is slow, that is flying straight and level because it has to, that cannot climb away from you, and that has no possible means whatsoever of shooting at anything behind her. The armor is thickest around the nose and the cockpit tub, facing forward and downward, because that is where the ground fire comes from. From dead astern and slightly above, the picture is completely different. You are looking at the oil cooler, the rear fuselage, the tail, and a man who cannot see you. So they queued up. That is the word the Soviet accounts use, and it is accurate. A pair of fighters would sit in behind a formation of Sturmoviks and take them one at a time from the same position, with all the time in the world, like men at a fairground stall. The Il-2 pilots did what they could, tight defensive circles, flying so low that a fighter attacking from behind risked flying itself into the ground, weaving. But there is only so much you can do when you fundamentally cannot see the man who is killing you. The losses in 1941 and 1942 were appalling. You will see figures quoted for the average number of sorties an Il-2 survived, and they are usually single figures. I will come back to how much faith to put in them. But the shape of it is not in doubt. They were being slaughtered from behind, and everybody from the pilots to the design bureau knew exactly what was missing. So they put him back. It started out in the field. Units began cutting the fairing away behind the pilot and bodging in a position for a second man with a machine gun, unofficially, because they were losing aeroplanes and had had enough. That is the mechanic's answer. The drawing office is 1,000 miles away, and the problem is here, on my hard standing, this morning. From late 1942, the two-seat version came off the production lines properly, with a lengthened canopy and a rear gunner behind a heavy 12.7 millimeter machine gun. And it made an immediate difference. A fighter coming in from astern now had somebody looking straight back at him down a gun that could genuinely hurt. And now I have to tell you the part of this story I have never got comfortable with, and I have had 30 years to try. The bath was already designed. Think about what that means as engineering. That armored hull is the primary load-bearing structure of the aeroplane, and its rear bulkhead is a fixed thing in a fixed place carrying real loads. To extend the shell backwards over a second man, you would have to redesign the primary structure of an aircraft already in mass production, in factories that had been picked up and moved 1,000 miles east ahead of the German advance. You would add a couple of 100 kilos, well aft of the center of gravity, to a machine that was already too heavy and already a handful on a muddy strip. And you would have to stop the lines to do it, so they did not do it. The gunner went behind the bath, outside it, not inside the armor, behind the back wall of it, out in the ordinary fuselage, sitting in a lot of aircraft on little better than a canvas sling strap rather than a proper armored seat, with a thin plate here and there and canvas and plywood everywhere else. He had a good gun, a good field of fire, and an excellent view of everything that was about to happen to him. And between him and a 20mm cannon shell there was, effectively, nothing at all. The same aeroplane, the same sortie, the same burst of fire coming up the fuselage from astern. It reaches him first. Then it reaches the back wall of the bath, and it stops. You can guess what the numbers did. Gunner casualties ran at a multiple of pilot casualties several times over. The figure you will see quoted most often is something on the order of 4 gunners lost for every pilot lost, and I want to flag that hard right now. That is an estimate. It comes out of Soviet-era record-keeping that was patchy and political, and historians argue about it. But every serious account of this aeroplane from every direction agrees about the direction of the thing. The back seat of an Il-2 was one of the most dangerous places to sit in the entire Second World War. Gunners were sometimes drawn from ground personnel with very little training. In some units, they were not even formally carried as aircrew. And that is not a design failure in the ordinary sense, and that is exactly what sticks in my throat. Nobody in this story is stupid. Every decision in the chain was defensible on the day it was made. Armor the pilot, make the armor structural, keep the weight off, Keep the lines running because the country is being overrun. Put a gunner back in because we are being murdered from behind. Every one of those on its own is the right call, and the sum of them is a machine with a fortress at the front and a canvas seat 18 inches behind it. Which brings me to the single most quoted line about this aeroplane, and it is nearly always told wrong. In late 1941, with the factories in chaos in the middle of being evacuated east and Il-2 output well behind where it was wanted, Stalin sent a telegram to the plant directors. The famous line in it is that the Il-2 was needed by the Red Army like air, like bread. People quote that as though it were a compliment, a great leader recognizing a great machine. It was nothing of the sort. It was a rocket, delivered to named men personally responsible for output by a man who had people shot. The rest of that telegram is considerably less lyrical. It demands more aircraft immediately, and it leaves nobody in any doubt whose fault it will be if they do not arrive. It is not praise of an aeroplane. It is a threat wrapped round a metaphor, and it worked in the way such things worked there. Production went up and up and up. By 1943, they had learned how to use her properly, and this is the bit where I get to be an enthusiast again, because tactically it is rather beautiful. They stopped making single passes. A group of Sturmoviks would arrive over a target and get into a great wheel, each aeroplane following the tail of the one in front. As each machine came round the front of the wheel, it would tip into a shallow dive, attack, pull off and rejoin the back of the circle. So the target was under continuous attack for minutes at a stretch, and every aeroplane in the wheel was covering the tail of another one. The Germans called that formation the circle of death, and the individual run, that shallow weaving dive in and out of the wheel, is often described as the S-shape. It solved the tail problem with geometry instead of steel, which is the sort of answer I admire. And then in 1943 they got the weapon that made this aeroplane genuinely frightening to Armour, which up to that point, honestly, she had not been. Cannon and rockets are surprisingly bad at killing tanks from an aeroplane. The aiming is desperate and the hit rate is dreadful. What the Soviets came up with instead was the Tab, a shaped charge bomblet weighing about 1.5 kilograms. Little things. The whole point of a shaped charge is that it does not need mass or velocity. It needs to touch. And the top armor of a tank is the thinnest armor on it, because nobody expects to be shot at from directly above. So an Il-2 would carry a couple of hundred of these loose in her bomb bays, fly over a tank formation at low level and pour them out in a stream. So a carpet of bomblets came down across a strip of ground perhaps 15 meters wide and a couple of hundred long. You are no longer trying to hit one tank with one bomb. You are covering a field with hundreds of small chances, any one of which will burn straight through a roof plate. They were used in numbers at Kursk in the summer of 1943, and they were, by every account, a very nasty shock. Now, the claimed tank kills from the air at Kursk are wildly inflated, and that is true of every air force on every side. But the weapon was a genuine step change, and German armored formations changed the way they dispersed because of it. And since I am a fitter and not a poet, here is the maintenance man's grumble as well. Aluminium was desperately short, so a great many Il-2s were built with the rear fuselage, everything behind that steel bath made of wood. Plywood shells, glued and pinned over wooden formers. As a production expedient, it was completely correct. It saved metal the country did not have, and it could be built by furniture workers who had never been near an aircraft factory. And it was a menace to look after. Glued wooden structure hates damp, it hates snow and thaw, and it hates being hammered by vibration and gunfire. Joints let go. skins delaminated. There were structural failures traced back to glue that had simply given up. And you have a wooden tail bolted to a steel bath, two materials that move and age at completely different rates, joined at one bulkhead, being flown off a muddy strip by men who have been awake for 19 hours. Every fitter listening knows the sort of mourning that produces. And still, they built them, in the middle of losing the western third of the country, with entire factories loaded onto trains and rebuilt in fields in the Urals, and started up again in buildings that did not yet have roofs. The Soviet Union produced something like 36,000 of these, over 42,000 counting the Il-10 that followed. That is comfortably more than every Spitfire and every Messerschmitt Bf-109 ever built, added together. The workforce was largely women and teenagers, because the men were at the front, and the photographs of those lines show girls of 15 and 16 setting rivets into 700 kilos of armor plate. So, here is the turn, and here is why I wanted to talk to you about this aeroplane rather than another. The story everybody tells about the Il-2 is the flying tank, the indestructible one, the one that came home with her wings shot to lace and the pilot climbed out and lit a cigarette. And that story is true. I have not spent the last half hour debunking it because there is nothing to debunk. The Armored Bath did exactly what Sergei Ilyushin promised. The Il-2 had, by a distance, the most survivable cockpit of the Second World War, and thousands of men walked away from things that would have killed them instantly in anything else in the sky. And the same aeroplane, the exact same airframe on the exact same sortie in the exact same burst of fire, was also one of the deadliest places to sit in the whole war if you were the man 18 inches further back. That is the inversion. It is not that the legend is wrong. It is that the legend is half a story, and we have all spent 80 years telling the pilots half. One machine, two completely different wars, and the thing that decided which of those two wars you were fighting was not skill or luck or the enemy. It was a line on a drawing. It was where a designer, working under conditions I would not wish on anybody, drew the back edge of a steel bath. Inside that line, the finest protection of the war. Outside it, canvas. And when we say the Il-2 was indestructible, what we are actually saying without meaning to is that the part of it we chose to notice was indestructible. The gunner is not in the legend. He is not on the poster. He is not in the phrase flying tank. He is in the casualty returns 4-1 and then he is gone. Now let me be honest about the evidence, because I have thrown numbers at you all the way through this, and you are entitled to know how firm the ground is under them. The design story is solid. Sergei Ilyushin and his bureau are documented, and so is the prototype's two-seat layout, the change to single-seat production, and the reversion to two seats from late 1942. And the armored hull is not a matter of opinion at all. You can go and put your hand on one. There are preserved examples, including aircraft dragged out of lakes and bogs decades later and rebuilt. The loss statistics are an entirely different matter, and anybody who quotes them without a caveat is either being careless or selling you something. Soviet-era record-keeping in the middle of that catastrophe was patchy at the very best of times, and it was also political. Units had every incentive to report favorably. Categories of loss shifted about. Much of the material was shut away from historians outside the country for decades, and is still argued over now. The 4-1 gunner figure is an estimate. It is widely repeated. It is consistent with what everybody who was actually there says, and I believe the direction of it completely. But it is an estimate assembled out of imperfect returns, not a fact you can put in the bank, And the same goes double for the tank kills claimed at Kursk. I would rather tell you that straight than hand you a clean number that sounds authoritative and is not. Because the thing we know for certain is not the ratio, it is the design. The armor stopped. One man was inside it and one man was not. You do not need a statistic to see what that means. Which is the bit I actually wanted to leave you with. Every protective system has an edge, every single one. The armor, whatever it is made of, goes so far, and then it stops, and there is a line, and that line was drawn by somebody. Usually somebody sensible, for perfectly good reasons, a long time ago and probably in a hurry. And on the far side of that line there is always somebody sitting. Not because anyone was cruel, the shell had to end somewhere, and the man in the front seat was the one the whole thing was designed around. And here is the part that really gets me, out in the workshop at 11 at night with a cold cup of tea. From the inside, you cannot feel the edge. The pilot of an Il-2 was not being callous. He was flying a machine that was demonstrably, magnificently, repeatedly protecting him. The evidence of his own eyes, every time he counted the holes and walked away from her, said this aeroplane looks after its people. He had no way of feeling that the same steel which had just saved him stopped dead 1.5 feet behind his shoulder. So here is the question I would like you to sit with, and it is a real one. In the systems that protect you, your job, your family, your team, your safety net, whatever it is that lets you feel reasonably all right about the world, where does the armor stop? Who is sitting 18 inches behind you, on the canvas seat in the same aeroplane, taking the same fire, with none of the cover? And would you even know? Because if you are inside the bath, everything feels marvelously well engineered. It nearly always does. Right. Comments. 2 questions, and I do read them, so tell me straight. First one, before today, did you think of the Il-2 Sturmovik as simply the indestructible flying tank, the one that shrugged everything off, or did you already know about the gunner sitting behind the armor? Be honest, because I did not know for years, and I have had my hands inside one. And the second one, the one I actually care about. Where in your world does the armor stop? Tell me about a system you are inside. At work, in a family, in an institution, where the protection is excellent right up to a line, and somebody is sitting just the other side of it taking the same risk with none of the cover. I have read some absolute crackers in these comments. I am off to have the same argument with Stan I have every time this aeroplane comes up. Stan reckons the Sturmovik is overrated, which he only says because I once told him the T-34 was the better tank, and he has never forgiven me. This from a man who spent 3 weeks rebuilding a carburetor before he noticed the fuel tap was turned off. And Bessie, bless her, still will not start on a cold morning no matter what I bolt to her. My granddad, who spent his war keeping engines running and did not talk about it much, told me something once when I was 19 and very pleased with a job I had just finished. Always go and look at the bit you did not design. That is where the trouble is. He was right. He usually was. So if you like having a machine taken properly to pieces, legend and all, and put back together honestly with the awkward bits still attached, then subscribe and stick around because this workshop is full of them. The crude one that won, the beautiful one that failed, and like today, the one that was every bit as good as they say she was for exactly half the men inside her. The name's Reg. Mind the oil on your way out. And the next time somebody tells you the Sturmovik was indestructible, don't argue with them. Just ask them which seat.